You won't believe how far one entitled HOA member went just to keep kids out of a neighborhood pool. This isn't your usual HOA drama. This one takes a wild, dangerous turn. It all started in a quiet suburban neighborhood where kids loved spending their summer days swimming at the community pool. But one woman, known by locals as the HOA Karen, had a big problem with that. She constantly complained about the noise, the water splashing, and even how the kids laughed too loud. Most people just roll their eyes and try to ignore her. But behind the scenes, she was getting angrier and planning something that would shock the whole community. Neighbors thought she was just being dramatic, until one day, the unthinkable happened. Kids jumped into the pool like usual, but something felt off. A strange tingling, like static, and then a scream. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt. But when the truth came out, jaws dropped. Authorities discovered that someone had tampered with the pool's wiring, deliberately making it unsafe. And all signs pointed to the last person anyone wanted to believe would go that far. How did a neighborhood dispute spiral into a police investigation and an arrest for attempted murder? And what made this HOA Karen snap? Stick around, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. The woman at the center of it all, Karen Lawson, had been a member of the Homeowners Association for years. She was known for her rigid rules, her constant emails about the tiniest infractions, and her ability to make anyone feel like they were breaking some unspoken code. While many residents rolled their eyes at her, they'd learned to keep their distance. But Karen's obsession with controlling the pool area went beyond what anyone could have imagined. For months, she'd been sending complaints to the HOA about the kids. Her emails were relentless, citing everything from noise complaints to the unsupervised chaos she claimed the kids were causing. To her, the pool wasn't a place for families to relax. It was a space she believed should cater only to well-behaved adults. The HOA had heard it all before, dismissing her concerns, but Karen wasn't used to being ignored. She wanted control, and she was willing to do anything to get it. When she saw a group of kids playing in the pool one afternoon, something in her snapped. She couldn't stand the laughter, the cannonballs. The energy that she felt was ruining the peaceful environment she so desperately craved. Little did anyone know, Karen had already taken matters into her own hands. She spent hours secretly tampering with the pool's electrical system, wiring it in a way that would send a dangerous shock to anyone who stepped into the water. The horrifying truth was just beginning to unfold. The day the pool was electrified, it was just another hot summer afternoon. A group of kids, including the Thompson twins and their friends from down the block, showed up to cool off. The sound of splashing and laughter filled the air, and for a moment, it felt like nothing could go wrong. But something wasn't right. As the twins jumped in, the youngest, 10-year-old Jake suddenly froze. He felt a sharp, uncomfortable tingling surge through his body, his heart racing. He tried to pull himself out of the water, but his legs felt numb, and he struggled to stay upright. His older sister, Mia, saw him panic and rushed over, only to feel the same strange shock as she grabbed his arm. Her skin burned as if she'd touched a live wire. She screamed for help, and it wasn't long before neighbors started rushing over. The pool, usually a place of laughter, had turned into a scene of chaos. By the time the paramedics arrived, the kids were pulled to safety, shaken but fortunately not critically injured. Yet the damage was done. Someone had intentionally altered the pool's electrical system, and everyone was pointing fingers at Karen. The police were called, and suspicion quickly grew. The neighborhood had always known her to be demanding, but no one had ever expected her to take things this far. As word spread, other residents began to recall strange things that had happened in the weeks leading up to the incident. One neighbor, a retired electrician named Tom, mentioned he had seen Karen hanging around the pool area late at night on multiple occasions, often fiddling with the electrical box. It wasn't enough to raise alarms at the time, but now everything seemed connected. Karen's obsession with controlling the pool, her increasing hostility toward the kids, and her quiet, almost eerie presence around the site all pointed to something darker. But Karen wasn't talking. She clammed up when the police arrived, refusing to say anything other than that she had no idea what happened. Her house was searched, and the officers found a series of notes detailing her complaints, but nothing that directly linked her to the crime. Still, the evidence was mounting. As the investigation into Karen's involvement deepened, the neighborhood began to fracture. Some residents rallied behind her, claiming she'd always been strict but never violent. They couldn't believe she'd go to such extremes over something as trivial as kids having fun. But the majority were growing more suspicious by the day, piecing together the oddities they'd witnessed and sharing their own unsettling experiences. The more they dug into her past, the more questions arose. Had anyone ever really known Karen at all? Detectives found that Karen had recently taken out large sums of money, and an old neighbor recalled that she'd mentioned something cryptic about fixing the pool in the past. It was all starting to feel like a web of lies, but no one could quite put it all together. Even the most obvious piece of the puzzle, her presence near the electrical box, wasn't enough to directly accuse her. There was still no hard evidence proving that she was the one who had tampered with the wires. Then things took a darker turn. A few days after the incident, a neighbor named Sarah, who'd been particularly vocal about Karen's behavior, received a threatening letter. It was unsigned, but had a chilling tone, telling Sarah to stay out of it, or she'd regret it. The letter was written in a hurried, almost frantic hand, but what struck Sarah the most was the subtle threat. "If you think the pool was the only place I've been watching, think again." Terrified, Sarah contacted the police, but now the investigation had reached a new level of urgency. It wasn't just about the pool. It seemed Karen was becoming more desperate to protect her secret. As the tension in the neighborhood grew, Karen's movements became even more erratic. Neighbors began to avoid her, and some even reported seeing her watching them from her windows at night. Then came the fateful day when Karen was finally cornered. Police had managed to uncover a video, one they'd almost overlooked at first, showing Karen in the moments just before the pool incident. It was grainy, but clear enough to see her standing near the electrical box, fidgeting with something. But the footage alone wasn't enough to pin her down, and that's when the real bombshell dropped. As police pieced together Karen's financials, they uncovered a shocking detail. Karen had been behind on her HOA dues for months, and her late fees had piled up. But what really caught their attention was the discovery of a hidden account she'd been using to funnel money. The money wasn't just for bills, it was for something much more sinister, something connected to her deep, underlying bitterness. The closer they got to the truth, the more Karen seemed to unravel, and it felt like the investigation was teetering on the brink of something explosive. But would the truth be enough to stop her before she did something even worse? The neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for the final piece to fall into place. Just when it seemed like Karen's actions were about to be fully exposed, a second bombshell dropped, one that nobody saw coming. Police had been investigating her finances for days, but there was a disturbing new lead, a mysterious phone call. It came in late at night, right after the authorities had started digging into her hidden account. The caller, a man with a low, gravelly voice, was demanding something from Karen, something that sounded dangerous. He threatened her, saying, "You know what happens if you don't deliver. Finish the job, or we'll finish you." The voice on the other end was clearly a man, but his identity was a mystery. Karen's reaction to the call was chilling. Detectives later learned that she'd immediately left her house, her eyes wide with fear. She'd been talking to someone who wasn't just controlling her, but using her as a pawn in something much bigger. With this new development, the investigation took a turn. They couldn't just focus on Karen anymore. The mysterious man on the phone, whoever he was, had a part to play in all of this. And Karen wasn't acting alone. It was clear she was being pushed into something more sinister than anyone had anticipated. But then came the final twist that left everyone stunned. Just as Karen was about to be arrested for the pool incident, she vanished. The police arrived at her home, only to find it empty. No sign of struggle, no obvious clues about where she'd gone. Just a single unsettling note left on her kitchen table. It read, "I've done what was asked. Don't come looking for me." The neighborhood was in chaos. Was Karen just a pawn in a larger game? Was someone else orchestrating everything from the shadows? The pool, the financial troubles, the strange phone calls, it all seemed to be part of a bigger conspiracy that no one had even imagined. And now, with Karen gone, the stakes were higher than ever. Who was really behind this, and what would they do next? As detectives scrambled to find Karen and piece together the full story, the tension in the neighborhood reached a breaking point. Everyone was asking the same question: had Karen been acting on her own, or was there something far more dangerous lurking just out of sight, waiting to strike again? The clock was ticking, and with every passing moment, the risk of something even worse happening grew. The investigation had just become a race against time. The tension had reached a fever pitch. Days passed without any sign of Karen, and the authorities were no closer to tracking her down. The neighborhood was on edge, with residents fearful of what might happen next. But then a breakthrough came, thanks to an unexpected source. It was Tom, the retired electrician who had first noticed Karen's suspicious behavior near the pool's electrical box. He'd been digging through his old files when he found something startling, a record of a similar incident that had occurred years ago in a different neighborhood. Tom reached out to the detectives with the information, leading them to a chilling discovery. The same man who had threatened Karen on the phone was connected to a string of other incidents involving sabotage community pools. Each one had been orchestrated by someone in a position of power, someone who had been using people like Karen to do their bidding. And shockingly, this man's identity was revealed to be someone no one could have predicted: the HOA president, Greg Miller. It turned out that Greg had been blackmailing Karen and other HOA members for years, using their fear and loyalty to manipulate them into doing his bidding. The pool wasn't just a place of fun for the kids, it had become a symbol of control for Greg, a way for him to keep the community in check. He'd been slowly pushing people to the brink, watching as they destroyed their own lives while he stayed hidden in the shadows. With this new lead, the detectives launched a manhunt for Greg. It didn't take long for them to find him, hiding out in a cabin on the outskirts of town, where he had been laying low, hoping the chaos would die down. But as they closed in on him, a final twist shattered everything. Just as Greg was about to be arrested, Karen reappeared. She walked into the police station, calm and composed, as though nothing had happened. She handed over a set of documents, evidence that proved Greg had not only been blackmailing her, but had been involved in a series of other illegal activities, including embezzlement and fraud. The documents revealed that Greg had been siphoning money from the HOA funds for years, manipulating the entire community for his own gain. But the real shock came when Karen revealed the final, unexpected twist. She had been playing Greg all along. She had been working with the police to bring him down from the start. Her strange behavior, the threatening phone call, and her disappearance, it was all part of a plan to bait Greg into making a mistake. Karen had known that Greg would try to silence her, and she used that fear to her advantage, turning the tables on him when the time was right. The police arrested Greg without incident, and Karen walked out of the station a hero. The community, still reeling from the events, couldn't believe what had just unfolded. What they had thought was a simple case of neighborhood conflict had turned into a conspiracy that ran far deeper than anyone could have imagined. The pool, the sabotage, the secrets, it all made sense now. In the end, Karen was no longer the villain of the story. She had been the one person who had seen the truth all along, and her actions had saved the neighborhood from a much darker fate. But even as the dust settled, the residents couldn't shake the feeling that there were still more secrets hiding just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered.